Everyone thought that the dog belonged to them. I do mean inside of the village, everyone thought that the dog was theirs, but the dog knew different. The dog belonged to no one. Not the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, the fishmonger, the greengrocer. It did not belong to anyone, but it would go to their doors and scritch, scratch, scritch, scratch, scritch upon their doors, and if it was hungry, then it would be given food. Now, it wasn't an old dog, but it lived by the side of the river, by the edge of the bridge, so that it was protected from the rain and the wind. But I will tell you this. One morning the dog woke up, and it could see that there were goose feathers falling from out of the sky, and it didn't know what they were, and they felt cold upon its tongue and its pads and its paws and its claws, and off it went, for it knew that it felt hungry, and off it went towards the town. Now, as it was walking amongst all of these goose feathers that were falling from out of the sky, it could hear people talking, and they were talking about a baby that was being born and how they'd travelled far to come and see all of their friends and families inside of the town. Now, there was nobody that would refuse the dog, and it heard the talk of all of the people who were travelling to see their friends and families, and it went to the first door and it scritch, scratch, scritch, scratch, scritched upon the door, and the door remained shut. The dog couldn't believe it, but it could hear people shouting and laughing and dancing and talking, and the smell of food was so beautiful in the air. So the dog decided it would go to another house and hear it scritch, scratch, scritch, scratch, scritched upon the door, and the door remained shut. It did not open. Now the dog raised itself up and looked in through the keyhole, and the dog in the street with the white goose feathers lying on the ground started to laugh because it could not believe what it saw, because inside of the houses people had put a tree. The dog thought this was the funniest thing that it had ever seen in all of its life. People taking a tree inside of the house, especially when there were plenty of trees outside of the houses. But off it went to another door, and it scritch, scratch, scritch, scratch, scritched upon the door, and the door remained shut. Now the dog was starting to feel quite hungry indeed, and it could smell the beautiful food, and when it looked in through the window, the dog couldn't believe it, for people had candles that were lit. They were lit inside of the house, placed upon the table by the side of the mantelpiece, and at the top of the tree they had placed sugared plums. They had placed fairies and baubles and beautiful things on top of the tree, and the dog would have laughed if it hadn't been so hungry. And every door it scritch, scratch, scritch, scratch, scritched upon, the door always remained shut, until it came to the house at the very edge of the town. And in this house there lived the old woman who had no family to come and visit her, the old woman who had not so many friends inside of the village. And the dog went up to a door and scritch, scratch, scritch, scratch, scritched upon the door, and the door squeaked open. The old woman was very pleased to see the dog. Oh, dog, my dog, it's lovely to see you. I haven't got so many visitors at this Christmas time. You're welcome to go. Are you hungry? She could sense that the dog was very hungry, and the dog looked about the old woman's house. There was a very small fire. There was only a small amount of food on the old woman's plate, but the old woman didn't wait for a single heartbeat. She took her knife and cut everything she had on that plate and put it into a bowl for the dog. The dog was so hungry that it didn't wait for a single sigh. It devoured the food, and it was only as it had licked the plate clean that it started to feel guilty that it had eaten half of the old woman's food, the old woman who had so little in the first place. The old woman sat down in a chair by the side of a very small fire and spoke to the dog. You're such a good friend to me, especially at this Christmas time. My children don't come and visit me as often as they used to, and they have children of their own, and I understand, and her eyes became heavy, and the old woman fell asleep. The dog, with a heavy heart that was filled with guilt, came from out of the house and started to walk along the street. The sound of the noisy merrymakers inside of the houses was almost deafening, and the dog wondered how they had so much and the old woman had so little. But as it was going along the road, who should it meet up with but the proud peacock, his huge green and blue feathers each tipped with what looked like an eye. And the proud peacock was there in the street. It looked at Dog and said, "Oh, Dog, why are you out at this time? You usually don't make it halfway through the village." The dog spoke about how it had heard people talking about a baby that had been born and how they must go and visit all of their friends, and how, and here it felt guilty,